Okay, so I'm going to walk you through how I would score the Goldman-Fristo as I'm administering it. So obviously on the front, I at least put the kid's name and you calculate the age. Again, note you're actually calculating the days. Some tests you only calculate years and months, but we don't round up to the next month either. All right, so when I actually administer the Goldman-Fristo, I do the sounds and words. Okay, and so this is obviously a scanned version of the protocol, but it works for me and it should work for you. So again, when I'm doing it in the moment, what I am doing is listening to the target consonants. Again, going for still 3 targets every consonant in all words, which makes it sort of very functional in terms of your use of time. And as I'm administering it, I'm just crossing off the sounds that the kids are producing incorrectly. If I catch it, I'm going to write next to it or over it the sound that the kiddo substituted. So for house, if he said out, I cross out the H and the S and I'd put a T next to the S. And door, if he said doa, I'd probably cross off the D and the R, probably put a W and a schwa. And then, or actually, I wouldn't cross off the D because he said the D, and cross off the R and then go from there. And cup, if he said tup, cross off the K, put a T, and leave it at that. When I'm all done, if I need to listen to it again, I will. And then that's when I'm going to write the actual transcription. If it's produced correctly, I don't obviously write anything, but I usually wait till after I'm all done, after the kids left, and then I'm going to go through and write the actual transcription of what sounds were substituted, deleted, added, so on and so forth. But in the moment, all I'm doing is crossing off and trying to identify the sounds that are produced in substitution for the target sounds. Okay, and so to explain the Goldman-Fristo 3 again, you see there's 12 pages to the protocol for sounds and words, and what usually we're worried about is the first 4 pages. The front page, obviously the 2 pages with the words, and we'll talk about scoring that in a second. And then this 4th page, students don't often give this page the what's the word? So, they don't appreciate this as much as they should. So basically this page identifies all the target consonants in their initial, medial, and final position, recognizing medial sort of subjective because it's either the onset of a second syllable or the coda of a first syllable, but we'll just go with it. But you can see how many times each of the consonants are targeted in their different word positions. And then we also have the clusters, primarily targeting initial clusters, which is most functional for us, has a medial cluster of a BR as well as one final cluster. I don't know why they bothered, but we got it. And so to explain how I actually score this, once I've gone through and transcribed, crossed off all my target sounds, whatever, honestly, it wants you to count initial is purple, medial is green, and final is blue. I'll be honest, when I look at this, it is so hard for me just to scan through this and figure out who's my initial, who's my medial. As you see here for pajamas, the J and the are medial consonants, but they're often lined up with the final consonants. It is really ridiculously hard for me to count this way. So for that's the second page. The first page, I'll be honest, I don't ever use these boxes. They just don't work for me. What I do is I go to this page, this 4th page, and I work and identify my errors here. So again, for cup, cup is a final, cup's number 4. If he said cut onto a cup, I cross off the 4, in the final position because that's where the sound was an error. Usually I don't write the sound that was produced instead here. If you did that, it just gives you that much more information about the sound. But usually I'm just crossing off the sounds that are an error here in the different positions. And then what I do is when I'm all done here, this is where I count up my initial, medial, and final consonant singletons as well as my clusters. So I'll go here, and right here I'll write 31 and 15 and 20 or however many sounds are in error. And the same with the clusters. Again, clusters are counted incorrectly if even one of the sounds is produced an error. So if you said instead of, what's the word? It's blue. So the BL cluster is in blue. So if you said boo, you're going to count it wrong. If you said bew, you're going to count it wrong. If you said loo, you're counting wrong. Both sounds have to be produced correctly in order to count that cluster as correct. And note these clusters, even though when you're looking at the production, let's go up to blue right here. So the B and the L, to a point you're counting them separately because so you can make note of what part of the cluster was produced incorrectly. The B and the L are not counted individually in the singleton evaluation. They are only counted in the cluster evaluation, if that makes sense. Okay, so again, in the end, I identify how many errors here, and that's, I sort of change this. So I just have initial singleton, medial singleton, final singleton, initial cluster, medial cluster, final cluster is what I do. And that's where I add up for my total raw score. Again, Goldman-Fristow raw score is a number of errors. Okay, and based on the number of errors, you're going to calculate your standard scores, percentile scores, so on and so forth. Just another comment, why I like the Goldman-Fristow 3 is since it identifies every constant that's produced, it is actually very easy to do percent constants correct because your constants are right there. And so usually what I do off to the side, I'll write constants correct here, and then I'll count P. There's 6 P's. So if 3 of the 6 were produced correctly, I'll just do 3 of 6. For the B's, there are 4 B's. If 3 of the 4 B's were produced correctly, I write 3 of 4. And so it gives me, very quickly and easily individual sound accuracy of all my singletons. And then you can add up all those sounds without too much trouble if you can count. And you can get an overall percent constants correct. Again, you can do it for your clusters. Sometimes I'll even count the singletons in the clusters if I'd rather just target singletons and not clusters. But you can add those in easily too. So I just get a lot of additional information from this sheet right here. Let's close that. We get a lot of additional information from this, as well as just the number of errors that the kids are producing. Okay, so that's how I would go about administering and scoring the Goldman-Fristow. And then again, going back to the first page, let's look at our first page. For sounds and words, total raw score, again, it's a number of errors, and we're looking for standard scores, confidence intervals, percentile ranks. I don't care about age equivalent or the growth scale, so we never report those. Those aren't useful. But again, for the standard scores, we're going to go over here. You're going to look in the manual. And so, for example, this kiddo here, she's for ages 4 to 4 or 5. Goldman-Fristow separates out female and male scores. I've seen lots of students miss that. So just note females on the left, males on the right, and you got your raw score again in terms of number of errors. I'll leave it up here so we can look at the ratings. So if they had 18 errors, female would be a 94, male would be a 98 standard score. So you can see that the males are given the benefit of the doubt and are allowed to have a few more errors. Again, in terms of confidence intervals, usually I do a 95% confidence interval. That just gets more kids, gives me a broader range of what would be considered accurate. So I usually report 95% confidence interval, and then you got your percentiles here. So again, a 34th percentile for females, 45th percentile for males. A pretty big difference. So again, we definitely want to make sure we're getting the right gender for our scores. And I think that is all I wanted to say about that.